everybody. It is Katie Koestner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as a victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our host and our guest for today. Welcome, everybody, back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner, and I'm so pleased to have all of you join us again for another episode. As a quick reminder, an important self-care note, the podcast talks about things around gender-based violence, discrimination, harassment, and all kinds of ways that we can be hurt or harmed by others, including those we care deeply about, or those in our workplaces, or those in our extended family. So it's incredibly important to me that as you listen, you engage in great push pause when needed, take a step away, go get a bite of chocolate, go get some fresh air, go pet a dog, whatever you need to take good care of yourself. And we hope very much that this podcast will be another episode where you find strength, you find healing, and you grow from the courage of others speaking out and taking a stand. And one such guest is exactly today's guest. I am so pleased to have with us Mike Short. And Mike and I met, which I'll talk about a little bit from now. But Mike, I'd love you to tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to your academic success and where you are now.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Katie. Thanks again for, like you said, we just happened to meet and struck a chord on so many issues. So just to introduce myself, I'm from the Boston area, went to Swampscott High School, and then started as a first year at MIT undergraduate. And it was so much fun that I never left. So I tried a few times, but all sorts of reasons kept me in the area. I was dating someone at the time, and I decided not to go to the other side of the country. And that's good because we got married. I think that was the right choice. But also sorry?
No, that's perfect. That's a good reason.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and that otherwise, the community, the people, the projects, and the energy really match my own personality. So that's why I decided to stay.
And Mike, just so our listeners know, I'm a bit of a math and science guru geek aficionado, and I think our listeners would love to hear kind of where you specialize in your academic studies and now in your professorship. So what sort of niche did you carve out for yourself?
Sure thing. So I did a dual major in nuclear science and engineering and material science and engineering, because I felt like one of the most underutilized tools in the fight against climate change is nuclear power for all sorts of historical and current reasons. And the big technical thing I thought needed working on was its materials of construction, everything from what you build it out of to how you monitor it and make sure it stays safe to what you do with the waste and materials at the end. And there isn't a nuclear materials major, so I had to do the two majors. And now that's what I do in my research is I study nuclear materials.
Oh, lovely. It sounds really helpful. And I love that you also brought in climate change. I actually posted on LinkedIn this morning about that issue as a passion. Someone had listed like 10 important things you must learn about. And for whatever reason, climate change and environmental conscientiousness was not listed. I was like, uh-oh, we're in trouble when this is the guru.
Boy.
I know, Mike, I know. But we think, I think my guests, my listeners should know, when we met, I was on my way to Kenya and Mike was coming back from an important trip to some of the border countries from Russia to do exactly some of this great work in not in theory, but in application, and working with the exact companies and manufacturers that might choose where to buy their materials and supplies from another supplier other than Russia. If I'm misstating that, Mike, just please let me know.
No, you've got it. I mean, I was coming back from Kazakhstan, where I have a great collaboration there with the Institute of Nuclear Physics. And there's a foundation that's active in former Soviet countries called the ISTC Foundation. And the goal is to fund people in labs who used to work in the sort of Soviet nuclear enterprise and get them working with the West on open science for the peaceful application of nuclear power and science.
Lovely. And for our listeners, please don't geek out on us. You're going to love where this conversation goes. And, you know, Mike and I just sat across from each other like I sat on a plane. And for whatever reason, I'm always like blabbing about my cause and my passion for lots of things in life. And Mike was equally passionate about his work and his cause. So it was synergy right from the start. And I wanted to tell our listeners something else you can learn about me. Was I once upon a time actually wanted to go to MIT. I wanted to be a chemical engineer, and my mom said, "You may not go to MIT because there's like 7% women." At the time.
I'm glad to say it's like 50-50 now, or pretty close to it.
Yeah, I wanted you to share that stat because it's, we've come a long way, baby. But there's still some legacies around this gender difference that, haunt, I think, the halls of MIT. And another we'll get into that, but another cool thing I loved about MIT is the buildings are all have numbers. There's not a name, except for Kresge Auditorium, where I spoke for 12 times in a row for the incoming students. But most of the buildings have numbers instead of names. To be very clear and mathematical. I don't know if there's a better explanation than that, Mike. Could you share any history of the naming of buildings?
Oh, I'd say you got it. I mean, a lot of the buildings do have names, but they've all got numbers, including Kresge. And it just kind of helps us get around really quick, where it's not an exact pattern, but for example, the even and odd buildings are on either side of the infinite corridor, generally speaking. And then they kind of go in an order, but those orders tend to break down as newer and newer buildings got there. But the nice thing is you can very compactly say, I want to meet you in this building, that room, with a quick number, and everyone knows where you go.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as the best X and XY axis. Z is only if you want to think about how many floors any building has, I guess. We could go up.
But, sure. All the room numbers have got Z in it too. So the number after the dash is the floor number. So you're totally correct. XYZ is built in.
That was a good guess then, Mike. I didn't know that was the case. I was just thinking in my weird brain. But I'm glad I was kind of right. So where we head from here, and for those of you in a listener capacity who didn't know, I did get back safely from Kenya. I did spend nearly 2 weeks there, and it was a bit of a trust fall. I just wanted to fill our listeners in how it went. The trust fall was the 5 random organizations that promised me up, down, left, and right that, I would be welcomed and we would accomplish great things. 2 of them were wonderful. So 2 out of 5 is not, better than half, but I'll take what I got. And the 2 were absolutely lovely. And I did get to help some of the poorest communities in Nairobi and the slum areas and work with teen parents, meaning they had their children sometimes at 14 or 15. And then the youngest of the teen mom groups, they started, teen is the wrong word, that 13 is teen. Some of them were pregnant at age 10 when they were homeless and needed some food. So one had her first child at 10, her second were twins at 11, and she had one more after that. So if there's any cause for pause, and this was also the conversation Mike and I had, was like, how do we think globally around all these topics and bring together how communities operate and how we can help them think about their economies what their economies consist of, and what creates sustainable jobs and family dynamics, as well as equity and equality simply between the genders. So that's where we head as we go into this. So, Mike, let's just go a little. When you arrived at MIT, let's talk undergrad. That year was in the 90s, or what year? When did you start?
2001, I started.
201. Okay, great. So you're there at 2001. And when you started, how was the gender? I want to talk undergrad as well as your faculty. How did it look at that point to you? If you can remember.
Oh yeah, I somehow never leaving the place. You remember a lot more than you'd think from those days. So
yeah,
gender was approaching 50-50. I don't think it was quite there yet, but it was really close. I mean, I'd heard obviously the rumors and old news about places like MIT being mostly men. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it wasn't, at least at the undergraduate level. Graduate is a different story.
So, Mike, well, wait. Let's just pause there, because so then I would have been applying almost about a decade before you. And that is a fast track to at least equity and enrollment. Like that flipped it. I bet it was maybe 10, 12%, 10 years before.
Wow.
Yeah. So think about how quickly they went from 12% women to nearly 50-50 in a decade. That's huge in my opinion. They must have been actively recruiting women to attend MIT.
I'm sure. So I don't know any of the sort of the back end of the admissions process. It's clear that there was a lot of work done.
Right. Well, on its face, that's what we know, without any evidence to state otherwise. But okay, so now what about the faculty part?
Sure. So the faculty and even graduate school is a different story. It's still very much male dominated. For example, I'm in the Department of Nuclear Science and Engineering, where we are making a huge concerted push to diversify in terms of gender and underrepresented minorities. And while it is working, we have a really long way to go. And there's lots of reasons for that. I think to sympathize with what your mom told you, it's like, well, you don't want to go somewhere where there's nobody who you can see yourself in their own shoes. That's a pretty powerful thing. And so you can't just say, all right, fine, we're going to admit this percentage of that many people, because it doesn't guarantee that they're going to want to apply. And it's not enough also to admit people. You've got to see them through and find whatever unique resources, help, and everything that they need to succeed, not just get in, but get out successfully, right? Without a huge struggle.
Yeah, well said, Mike. And that includes things like, what activities are available, and what sports are available, and what sorority that used to have. I think they did away with the Greek life, or maybe it still exists. I remember the Greek life changed substantially, but maybe you could also mention that. It means like the surrounding extracurriculars had to change as well.
Sure.
Are there still Greek life?
Greek life is still very big at MIT. There's lots of fraternities, sororities, and independent living groups. Though, as you'd imagine, a lot of things at MIT are done differently. Like some of the fraternities house a lot of women. In fact, I was housed in one of them, Tau Epsilon Phi, for my last year. And you wouldn't have known it's a fraternity, except that there was 3 Greek letters on it. But we had a lot of women living with us because that's what we wanted to do. And we also had a national chapter who didn't come down on us for that. And so I'm quite proud of the independent living groups, or ILGs, which are off-campus housing for people who just want to live together, not in a dormitory. And so we've got a thriving community of those as well.
And are they themed, Mike, around, a cultural or a food or I can remember at Oberlin, some of the collectives were like the environmental, or like we cook and we do everything ourselves. Like, are they themed independent living groups?
I wouldn't say that they're themed explicitly. Like each group isn't we're the this and that living group, but they are definitely culturally distinct.
But gender inclusive.
Quite, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that update for me and probably for many of our listeners. And The only other thing I wanted to ask you about, I remember when I was working with Dr. Vanderveer, at one point it was required to choose housing before you started school. And that part of that choice was choosing a fraternity if you were going to do a fraternity. And then they changed that and did away with it. I think they delayed it until second semester. Does that resonate at all?
Yes, so now first year students need to live on campus, and the goal is that you don't want people going right into a fraternity, being off in an isolated community, with their friends, of course. But we had a couple of events that I'd say quite sad events that led to some student injuries and I think even a death that were the catalyst to change that culture.
Yeah, I think, Mike, I actually think I know that lawsuit because it happened. So there was a balcony not well made and a guy who had a lot to drink and he plummeted to his death. I think that's the one. I think
it would not surprise me, yeah.
It sounds like what you just referenced, but I remember it happened in my tenure of doing the work I'm doing. And that was a well-touted, like, who has the power and who affects change. And when the parents, bemoaned the death of their son, things started to change. And that was the catalyst that precipitated, I think, what we're talking about. But I just want to think about this as we talk, listeners. Mike and I are going to talk, I think, really deeply and broadly about structures and culture and institutional choices that might either foment change or perpetuate discrimination. Does that sound accurate, Mike?
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah. So what I'd like is, please listeners take note because Mike and I, we had the fastest, most vehement conversation for 38 and a half minutes on a plane. It was such a short little hop, skip, and a jump, but I felt like we covered a lot of ground and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that ground. But if I could give guidance or a table of contents to what we're talking about, it's, MIT is not the only. There's also Caltech. There's also New Jersey Institute of Tech. There's Texas Tech. There's plenty of tech institutions. And there's also elite, I would say, academically prestigious institutions in the U.S., Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, etc. And I think there's a unique, I won't say train wreck, but a unique set of variables that come into play when you take the most elite and distill it to a math science type focus institution like MIT and or Caltech. So it's like Harvard, but on just the most beautiful rails of this is what we do with all out excellence. If you know this is what you want to do, this is MIT. And I think that's what you told us at the outset, Mike, is once you know you've got it, you've got it. This is the right place for you.
Mm-hmm.
So just take note. So I just brought up housing and then support institution, I would say clubs, organizations, and maybe even, Mike, I'm not sure about when they had a Title IX, and you may not know, like a diversity inclusion director or a Title IX director, but you've been there for, a good long 22 years. So what have you noticed that they've added? And do you think it was sometimes proactive or always, or sometimes reactive, or are they trying to do better and be more proactive when they add institutions, departments, clubs, reconfigure things that might need a rejiggering to be more inclusive? That's a broad question, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I guess in the time I've been there, I've had a lot of positions from undergrad to grad student, postdoc, research scientist, and now faculty. And I've seen definitely acceleration in taking proactive steps as opposed to reactive, but it's still absolutely a mix because when a problem rears its head, you got to do something about it. I'd say when I was an undergraduate, I was quite unaware of the greater picture of things that were happening until I would hear about something that happened to someone I cared about. And that really, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, hearing these things. But I didn't connect any dots.
Wait. Before you tell, how did you hear about those you cared about?
Oh, this would always be word of mouth through people I knew, without exception.
And was it in person, was it electronic communication or in-person communication?
This was in person. I should mention to take everyone back. In 2001, there was no Facebook. We were still using AOL Instant Messenger. It was kind of the dying days of that. But everything happened in person. And I think Facebook hit us in 2003 or 4, I forget. We were one of the first schools to get it. But that's not where life happened. Life happened in person.
Would they catch you walking on the sidewalk or in the eating hall or where?
Could be anywhere. Could be at a dining hall. I lived in a dorm with suite kitchens, and so a lot of social life revolved around the suites there. Could be visiting a friend, could be meeting people between classes, could be at a club. It could be anything.
Brilliant. Okay, so, and here's my next question though, Mike. Before we keep going, why do you think people would share with you? I'm sure, don't be humble right now. What about you made you a good listener?
To put myself back in that situation, I'm trying to resist the temptation to assume that I am the person now 20 years ago, because I remember my own, insecurities and immaturities clear as day. So I know I was a different person. But at the same time, people would confide stuff in me, and I'm sure I was not the only one. But I found myself listening a lot, mainly because it seemed like the people that were talking to me needed someone to listen. That's all I knew.
I love that. And I think, for our listeners or supporters who are trying to support someone or learn how to be bystanders extraordinaire, Mike just said it so well. Just listen. But there must have been, I'm not saying micro, but Mike, I met you in person. And is it something about your demeanor, do you think? Or, sometimes it's eye contact or just being like, you can say one short, can I help you with something? And all of a sudden you could say can I help you can I help you find that pan? I'm imagining you as an undergrad. Can I help you find that bottle of milk in the fridge? And all of a sudden you're being helpful. And the next thing you know, someone's thinking, oh my gosh, Mike is really helpful. And so he tells me a lot. I'm imagining that might be you a little bit. Because remember, you helped me put my suitcase up.
Yeah, that's how we met. I saw I needed help with a suitcase. I just grabbed it. Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying, I'm imagining, maybe you were just helpful.
Well, yeah, I'd spent a lot of my time as an undergrad and grad tutoring people. Not officially, just if somebody needed help with a problem set, I'd do the teaching. And I guess this may be why everyone I went to school with told me, oh yeah, you're going to be a professor one day. And I did not believe them. I thought I was going to be out in the startup world doing whatever. And they were all right. They were all correct. But I realized I spent a ton of my time, late at nights, on weekends, at weird times and weird places, just teaching someone something.
Yeah, but I think you like myself and our listeners, I think the love of helping and learning is such a beautiful coin. When you love learning and then you love helping, it's perfect. But now we might turn the page to get to that more difficult part of the conversation, Mike, because I once said, I'll give a quote and then you respond, if you would, please. I once, I'm asked to opine about how things change and what are catalysts for gender equity, blah, blah, blah. And I once said, the last to fall toward gender equity and inclusivity and calling out the wrongdoings will be the best. And I put a period there. And the best, you can define that noun with any sort of genre of institution or business. The best, I'm sorry to say I've not explored it, but Morgan Stanley, the best traders on Wall Street, those who have the most money, those MIT and Harvard. And here's my theory, and then you can respond, please. My theory is if I'm at, let's say, where I went, or even Cornell, I'll say I did a stint at Cornell. Cornell's an Ivy, it's good, but it's not Harvard, and it's not Princeton, and it's not Yale, and it's not Stanford. It's not. It's not quite those. So if I'm a professor or a student, like I was at Cornell, and I get harassed, harmed, discriminated against, assaulted even, I at least can say, okay, this is Cornell. I'll go to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, or MIT. I'll try to move over to the one of the next 1 in 5 best, right? There's a little tiny 1% better than where I am, where I could go, and hope that it'll be a better experience. And it's even more change happens, Mike, when I'm at, like, I'll just go Ohio State or all the mid-tier schools, right? Even a Bucknell or all the private colleges. Maybe, I don't know about, another one I've not explored is Williams, Amherst, and Swarthmore, right? The top 3 of the liberal arts. But when you don't have anywhere to go but down, when you're a complainant, you have to ask yourself, I worked my effing butt off to get where I am. Do I really want to sacrifice what I can stomach and overpower with my emotions and brain and put into place to give up on the intellectual prowess that I have been afforded by my achievement? And most of us would just say, I worked too hard, too long to become the best at this. I will not give up the colleagues, the brains, the surrounding luxury of resources, et cetera, and so I won't complain. So silence then rules, because there are not many who would give that up. And I will give you one more thing to respond to. First that one, but the second one is the rule breakers to what I just said are a little bit like me. I'm like, I always told myself, like, I can do math, I can do English, I can do all of this. Like, not that I'm Renaissance, but when I could tell myself I could still be the best at something else and find another way to be the best at something, I put my own belief in equity first, because I didn't need to hang on to a corrupt institution to tell myself that's all I need. It was more important to out them in their corruption than to stay. And so where our conversation lands are those two things. What did you learn? What do you think of my 2 theories of who might out an institution, but also why those who stay continue to be part of a system of discrimination and or abuse?
Sure. So I'd say I've spent now a lot of my time in the past 10 years or so talking to victims of these things. I've never been a survivor myself, but I've met a lot of people who have been, including a lot who I care deeply about. And first, I'll say that at these elite places, it's by definition incredibly isolating to be at a place like MIT, Cornell, anywhere. First of all, like you said, everything in your life had to go right to get you where you are. And so you may feel that it's perfectly normal to that one, your presence at this place is almost a divine stroke of luck, and that any little perturbation could knock you off that top of that precipice and send you falling down. it's a pretty normal thing to worry that, like, oh, if I make one little mistake, I could be out of here. It may not be true, but it's an absolutely valid thing to feel. The second one that comes into play here is the imposter syndrome, or the belief that everyone around you is better than you and you're almost there by mistake somehow, is rife at places like MIT. I'd say it's throughout the students and even the faculty. We're surrounded by people who are all trumpeting Nobel-worthy discoveries and world-changing things constantly. Like, even without social media or whatever, you just hear the amazing things people do, and you're like, and here I am just sitting in my lab, nothing's working. And so that creates a real feeling of isolation. Now, put on top of that no matter where you go in the whole world, you're going to find people of all levels of math and science intelligence that emotionally need to prey on people to feel good themselves or for whatever reason. And that feeling of isolation becomes a trap.
No, I want to keep going just really quickly. Prey on others. I like thinking about that because I think you're exactly right. When an ego is so needy and hungry for some other source of prey, I'll say it, to feed it, feed the beast, to make sure they feel sustained, I almost think is like they pluck off something else to make sure they are well fed. And that sounds very grotesque and kind of like sci-fi movie, but did I say it kind of like a little bit well?
I think it's quite accurate that, I've had a lot of conversations about different people going through different experiences in this regard. But one thing that I find myself saying to everyone without question is when they say, what was this person thinking? I say, you're assuming that they were thinking.
Ooh.
Probably they were feeling. They were feeling some need to, hold power or extract happiness or otherwise damage someone else because it satisfies a need of their own. They may not know it. They may not know why. They may not recognize it. They might recognize it. But in the end, we always take this approach of, well, what's logically causing this to happen? And it might not be straight up logic.
Can we talk about that for a second, Mike? That's my fear.
Yeah.
And my fear is, the brain is not always logical, even for very logical people who are very intelligent. And I think that was the most interesting thing that I've been thinking about since we met, is very, very smart people slip into some sort of it's almost like they delete one sort of logic synapse when they do these actions that should have been logically deleted. Does that make sense?
I guess it's like when some of the people who've done things to people I care about, they've got it all. They could be, either a student or a faculty member with or without tenure. I mean, who knows what their situation is? The point is, from an objective point of view, they've got it made. Right. And so you think, where is the logic and the risk of doing something like this to someone? Why would they even consider this? Forget whether or not they got the same morals as you.
Then let's ask this next question, though, Mike, because the stereotype that's repeated, because I like always being the spelunker and going deeper into the cave of what we think we know, we don't know, and finding the new stalactite, if you will. I think one theory is they crave control. In the world of sexual violence, there's this word used time and time again, Mike. It's called control and power. But I'm going to say, while I study all this, I don't think it's all about control and power. Sometimes, I'm going to tell you, this is my theory, I'd like you to hear, respond. I think sometimes it's desperation and need. It's not they have enough control and power in their world. But I think it's almost like a needy, please just tell me I'm okay. They just need maybe a better word is affirmation. What do you think about my theory? It's not just they already have power and control. They just need someone to say, I'm okay. I still like you. I don't know. What's your thought on that?
I think certainly people could be seeking affirmation or validation, and that manifests itself as a desire to control from the outside.
Right,
But then if you
right.
look at the root cause of
The
this,
root,
it's
the root.
not, I want to rule the world and everyone in it. I don't think that's the way a lot of these people think, because in addition to speaking with victims, I've spoken with supposed perpetrators.
I know. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like it's not so simple and linear. And I mean, if our listeners and those of you who work in Title IX and doing this research, I think, Mike and I are not sitting full on in your spheres, but we're helping you think about what your assumptions are and what the vernacular is that you've just started to regurgitate. You need to shape shift what you're thinking a little bit. So, Mike, I think what you said is right. Let's say it one more time for our listeners. Can you say what you just said one more time?
Sure. So I think your theory may have something there where the whoever is doing this to someone may be seeking affirmation or validation of an aspect of themselves that manifests itself as a desire to control or a desire to extract certain reactions from people. So the symptom may be control, but the cause may be something missing within.
Right. I think that's so well said. And for our listeners and those of you doing research or going off to grad school, please know this is our deep dive on like thinking and really theory. And Mike, I didn't have a chance to tell you this, nor our listeners, but having done this work for 30 years, my interesting information that I bring is every single night I go and speak, including Mike at MIT. There's one graduate of your institution I quote a lot, and I'll give this quote, but I'll also he's a victim. So he sat down in the front row of Kresge. I don't think I didn't tell you this. We had too short of a stint. So it was probably the 7th year I was there. Incoming class, everyone had left the auditorium, and he sat down and I sat down next to him, and he said, "I'm from a small town in Texas. You probably never heard of it. It's 5 hours from the nearest airport." And when I was 8 in the living room in front of the television set, it was my uncle. I never told anybody, not even my dad, until I told you.
Wow. And this was in an auditorium for the first time saying
Yeah,
this.
front row. Mike, he came down at orientation. Imagine the mayhem of orientation for a new kid on the block at MIT. And he was willing to tell me, a random stranger, that story. But where I go to is, maybe the uncle there's totally different types of perpetrators. And we need to talk about MIT's like structure. But I'd like us at least talking about this theory. It would be short-sighted for those of you who do this work in this field, who just use power and control as your mantras all the time. I'm begging you to listen to a little bit of me and a little bit of Mike tonight, and just know that it's not that simple. It's not a binary code. This is a complex structure of needs and wants and psychology and a lot of things. And while you might have to press it into some sort of output to qualify for a grant, like I'm sorry, Mike, I'm speaking to the idea that so often I feel like those of the people I meet who are only able to think about this in a limited capacity for a job or a grant, they're not thinking big and wide sometimes. But we can come back to that. Oh, do you want to? Oh, you have to do that for your job too, though. You have to qualify for grants.
Of course, it's and in the end, it's even in the world of pure science, if you want to get down to the mechanism or why is something happening, you got to identify the root cause. And I'd say a common misconception of what people do is take the first simplest hypothesis and just assume that's the way it is. Like I'd say over application of Occam's razor, where this says that the simplest explanation is usually right. Now, the key word is usual. And there's this other one that I find myself saying at least once a week, which is correlation does not mean causation. It's just because you see something happening in a certain way correlated with some other variable doesn't mean it's the reason it's happening. So I want to amplify what you said and say it would be oversimplistic to just think that every perpetrator is looking for power, because you may not be able to best help the victims that need help by simply parroting that same oversimplified explanation against evidence that may be in front of you.
Yeah, and let me just ask you this next question, Mike. If we have to, I feel like it's a little bit of a luxury to be able to expand the number of variables or the quick study. I feel like I'm afraid our whole system is built in with this very simplistic fill in the blanks, give me this paragraph, no more than 700 characters. You know what I mean? Like it's not, the whole system is broken. I don't know. That might be too big for our conversation, but
there's a point to that though, that in beyond just helping survivors of this trauma, in almost everything, there's something I've been describing, and I don't know if it's the right words for it, but I call it "there I fixed it" syndrome, where application of some simple little thing, almost a band-aid on a giant problem, it's tempting to think, okay, I did something, I've fixed it because I did something, without actually knowing whether it's fixed. And to get into what I think you want to talk about, it could be the establishment of some of these offices meant to help victims with what they experience, versus are you actually measurably helping them with what they need? For example, establishing these offices is not tantamount to fixing the problem. It's the first step.
100%. My goodness. I'm eternally grateful that we met. So let's go big and wide just for the next. And listeners, good news. Mike and I, this is like a 2-part story. So I promise this will be not the last conversation with Mike. And even if we have to keep going with Mike, but we're hopeful to have 2 join us next time, who can speak to some of what we're about to discuss. So let's go to this next place. At MIT, you just mentioned, of course, survivors, even since undergraduate, would come to you. And we didn't talk about what they were survivors of, discrimination, assault, or by whom. But maybe we start there. Like who would talk to you about what?
Sure. So,
and without naming
just so you know,
we're going to protect everybody.
Yeah. So, just so you know, I'm gonna withhold identifying details from any of this. I strongly believe that it's for someone who experienced this, it's their story to tell, and I don't want to divulge too much or put any words in their mouths. But I will say, in generalities, I've talked to people who have been victims of discrimination, who have been a lot more victims of verbal assault, but physical assault has happened a few times. I would say it's the vast minority of the people who have talked to me, but it's not absent, as well as sexual assault. And these are only the people. This is like the small subset of people who talk to me about this. I don't know who didn't, of course, but certainly it's happening around us. I would wager that almost everyone, if not everyone, knows someone this might have happened to. They just may not know it yet.
I think that's well put, Michael. We talk about that, Micah, on the show a lot. That some people don't even know what the definitions of these boundary crossings are. So I think we could do it 2 ways, Mike. We could either give context for what experiences were divulged to you, and who the perpetrators were, or kind of a timeline. And I'm thinking for now, let's do it this way. Let's give one or two examples of each that you mentioned. You mentioned discrimination. Then there's also verbal harassment and physical assault and sexual assault, 4 things. I think we go through 4 over your last 23 years there. Like, let's just talk about 1 or 2 per category on what they look like and what happened. Because I think our listeners will understand case studies. Like, these are real case studies, and don't divulge any names. Please give the context to the best of your ability.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with one that I actually saw, because this was a shared experience.
Perfect.
So in this case, it's a case of gender-based discriminatory language, which, that runs a wide spectrum from microaggressions to outright really nasty stuff. And this was somewhere in the middle, in a very uncomfortable place to even witness. So I was in a laboratory where some visitors were being shown around, and they came into the graduate student office. And the person giving the folks the tour started introducing the students and said, okay, this person is working on this type of research, and this person's working on that kind of corrosion, and this person's working on that kind of physical effect. And then he turned to the one woman and said, and this is the group hot chick. And all us students are just kind of frozen. It's like, what the hell was that? And, when you realize later, when you're in that moment, you don't always, even if you know something's wrong, you don't always think immediately to just pipe up and shut that down. In the instant it happens, don't even let people go out the door. And this was one of those situations that kind of woke me up to, got to be ready for anything. To, like you said, to be a good bystander is to be ready to spring at any second. And I wasn't that yet.
And just, Mike, you're doing great, but remind our audience one more time, this was the context of like walking around admissions.
So in this, I'm sorry, yeah, in this case, it was visitors coming into a laboratory.
Around 2005?
A little later than that, yeah. They're like just a little before 2010. So a researcher was showing visitors around their laboratory and introducing the equipment as usual, and then introducing the students. But the one female student was introduced as the group hot chick, while all the men were introduced by the work that they were doing.
You said group hot chick?
Hot chick, yep.
Oh my gosh. Who said hot chick?
Every group needs one was the explanation that was given.
By the tour guide? Oh my gosh, Mike, you're the best. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
Yeah, then none of us there thought that was right. But at the same time, I don't remember anyone just standing up and saying, that won't fly immediately, which is what I wish I or someone had done in the moment. But it's one of those, you either thought of it too late, or you were scared in the moment, or I honestly don't remember my exact feelings, because it's like you process that it happened 5 or 10, 15 seconds later, and then by then the people are walking out the door.
Was this your lab?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. They were showing your lab, and now you're a professor too. Oh my gosh. Mike, I'm just sitting with you for a second, because I can imagine you looking back on that whole thing and being like, oh my gosh, you froze in the moment. And that 1 out of 5 girl has a permanent hearing of those words and seeing your reaction. But
what does that say to the person that, they, like you said, they worked that hard to get where they were. They're at the top school in the world, according to a lot of rankings. And then they're reduced to that.
Wow. Okay. Let's follow up. Did you ever follow up? What was the end result of that situation, if any?
So I did follow up with the person significantly later, a lot later than I would have liked. But in the end, it's one of those like
person. Wait. To clarify, person leading the tour, or person taking the tour?
The person leading the tour.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, as in the person who actually said it.
Gotcha.
But my words were, you ought to apologize, because 1, it's right. 2, it never should have been said. And 3, to try to appeal to the one of her logic, I thought was like, okay, let's assume this person doesn't think there's anything wrong with that. try and explain logically, if you don't, there'll be more trouble to come.
Mm.
Because it's like, how many senses of whatever's going on in this person's head can I appeal to?
How did they respond when you said that?
Nonchalantly, and I don't remember an apology being given.
To
At
you?
least I didn't hear about it. No, to the person, the woman this was said to.
Mm.
Certainly not to me, but I wasn't owed an apology, I think.
Of course. And did you alert anyone above that person about what happened?
No, at the time I was a student, and for whatever reason, like you said, the silence, right, is,
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't use the proper channels, but I did.
No, there's no guilt right now. We're just like going to empower everybody going forward. So that was the verbal one. Let's do 2 more, at least for now. What else have you witnessed? Just give us 2 that come to your mind.
Yeah, so there was one, I wasn't involved in this, but I sort of heard it going on play by play, and this is what woke me up to the frustrations with the systems that are put in place meant to protect people. This was a case of stalking, where one of the students at MIT was being stalked by another, and it just kept going on. And you would think, okay, like, stalking's illegal, you can go to the police, you can get an anti-stalking order, you can get a restraining order. But I just kept hearing very indirectly that this was still happening, this is getting worse, I'm getting scared, I'm like, all of the escalation without action that you see going on, and it just frustrates me to the point where it's like, well, can't I file something on behalf of this person? Actually, no, you can't file charges on behalf of somebody else, is what I learned. So it got me talking to some of the people who were involved and were hearing firsthand information. And then this is when I started to hear some really strange explanations that touch upon something you mentioned earlier in today's podcast. Are these people looking for validation or affirmation of some kind? I started to hear things like, oh, the person's from a different culture. Oh, they just don't know how to flirt. Oh, they're just looking for attention and they're really immature about getting it. And it was always like, oh, this or that. Here's a rational explanation for why this is happening. They never said it was right, but they said, this is why it's happening, as if to, I don't know, elicit sympathy, try and take the perpetrator's side, but none of that sat well with me.
Okay, wait. One clarification. They use they pronoun? Is that
No, this is, I mean, I don't want to give away the genders of the people involved.
Was it
right?
just the administration or Title IX or?
This was anyone I would talk to, from people that would hear it firsthand. At the time, I was not that in touch with the administration because I wasn't yet a faculty member.
Oh.
But what I did hear was happening was that whatever department, we didn't have a separate, like right now we have a department called IDHR, or Institute Discrimination and Harassment Response. We didn't have that department at the time. And so everything was lumped into human resources or something like that. And this is when I learned that the goal of human resources in any organization, right, not just a school or MIT, is not to protect the humans. It's to protect the institution.
So well said, Mike.
And
lovely.
No, a lot of people have told me that exact phrase when I come frustrated, pissed off, ready to do something. And I was like, how can I act? And they said, you have to understand something about HR. And I was like, is this just here? They said, no. This is HR everywhere, in every organization everywhere. It's just good HR departments have people in them that really care about the people. But a satisfactory HR department preserves the institution.
Right. They only stay employed if they preserve the institution. So well said, Mike. Let's do one last, and then I know our listeners will love a part 2. So we did your first person, and thank you. I go back to that one. I think it was really honorable and helpful for you to admit to our supporters and listeners that you didn't know what to do on the spot. We're not trained under duress to know how to be perfect at responding to terrible incidents. And I think because you are that brilliant. Most people will say, oh my gosh, thank God Mike didn't do it. I can learn how to do it because Mike's learning how to do it. So thank you for your grace. Thank you for your vulnerability and stating that, Mike.
Of course. I mean, there's so many different kinds of intelligence, and places like Cornell and MIT select for one of them. They go for the book smarts. Emotional intelligence is something altogether different. I don't even know if there's a correlation or an anti-correlation, really.
I love what you just said. I think there might not be a correlation at all, but I think it's like some of us it's innate through when we map all the genes. Maybe we'll learn there's one that predisposes us for that sensitivity and empathy, but maybe not. But I do think, you have clearly shown our listeners that you can learn it and acquire it with deliberate intention. And when you were presented with lots of stories, Mike, that was the thing you hooked me on. Like, your brain was amazing, but when you hooked me on, like, how you acquired empathy and compassion and standing up and speaking out, that was amazing. I hate to keep going, but let's do one more story because listeners, guess what? Mike is going to reach out to a couple more MIT colleagues who will hopefully share their experiences to extend the value and experience of this podcast further than what Mike and I are doing right now. But last story, what's your choice? What's your last option that you want to share?
Sure. So this is
your vision and hope. What do you want to share?
Well, maybe I'll share a last story, but also it's evidence that the system can work if nudged properly. So I'd say now, since I joined the faculty 10 years ago, I found out that we have an increasing number of better systems in place that I would estimate at least 90% of my colleagues have a pretty strong moral backbone and want to do the right thing. It might be more like 98%.
Wow.
And yet somehow, when these things happen to people, the system doesn't often work.
Ooh.
This is despite the system being made up of us and everyone in the system being, in my subjective opinion, truly good people, not just paper pushers, not just trying to pass the buck on liability, but genuinely interested in helping people out of bad situations and making sure they can't happen again. But I see a real reticence to be the first one to act. And this is something I've now seen time and time again that...
Wait. Mike, I don't think it's a reticence for us to act. It's the institution to act. You said the reports are made. It's the institution.
It's a step before that. So,
please explain.
Yeah. So what I think is broken is once reports are made, I have seen the institutions at MIT spring into action and take decisive, positive action in favor of the victims. The trick is getting it there. So to me, the giant gap or the valley of death is convincing people, getting them to trust you, to say, to go back to everything that you said is, yes, you've worked yourself to the bone getting here, but speaking out and saying what happened is not only is it not going to endanger your academic standing or your career, but it's going to bolster it because it's going to show that you've got backbone, grit, and intelligence beyond the book smarts that we're all here for. So I think what's missing in our system is the entry point, the trust in the entry point. Part of this comes from systems botching previous cases for all sorts of reasons that, I won't go into the specific because I'm not privy to the full details of anything. But I will say from the outside, things were botched sometimes. And that word travels far and wide, and the negative consequences of that outlast the changes in the institution. Like, for example, we now have this IDHR office that's staffed by some people who I really, really trust and respect in terms of what they can do. That doesn't mean anything if people are afraid to make reports.
Is IDHR different from Title 9?
So it's kind of merged. I would say I wouldn't go on my exact wording on how they've merged or come together. But at this point, they handle the Title IX stuff, as well as others.
Well, I think the last thing before we wrap up is listeners, this was a wiry and many forked road that you went on with Mike Short and myself. This is, us thinking together about how to change systems. And I would say this is not a podcast just to listen to. This is one to deep dive and take notes on. I don't know what you think, Mike, but we were both thinking on this whole podcast the whole time. But I think we should do a second one. Hopefully we will, with your two colleagues, right?
Oh, yeah. I'd say if I were to extend an invitation to your listeners, it would be help us brainstorm that once you hear about something, how to get victims to be bold enough and sure enough in their actions to get things into the systems that are staffed by good people who are willing and eager to help.
There will be a part 2. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining this a little bit different podcast, not with a survivor, but with someone who's visionary and trying to help change the institutions, the practices, and the policies for MIT and many other places and spaces beyond. If you want to reach out to more resources to do self-care, please look on the Take Back the Night website. We have tons, including our legal support hotline, 567-SHATTER. Please call it. There's no fee. And we implore you, if you think you have a case, we will want to hear about it. And together we will survive, thrive, and go forward. Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.